When working with translations in your application, especially translations that you have to keep in state, it's very easy for you to show a different translation than the translation that the user has set. And in this video, I'm going to show you a tip on how you can avoid that. I have this very simple application. This is the home page. This is the English version. When we click on Dutch, we have the Dutch version, but you can see that this one did not change to Dutch. We will see why this is happening in a second. And we also have the feedback page, which has a form. And when we go back home, you can see that this is actually now Dutch. Anyways, let's see the code. Now I have set up the translations in a React application here, but depending on the application you use, you can go about this in several ways. But let's see why that problem is happening. So here in my use effect, I say that when this component is mounted, I want to set the welcome message to be the translation with this key welcome. And when we check translations, you can see all the translations I have, welcome and a bunch. This is the English version and this is the Dutch version. I don't know if you see the problem yet, but let me show you. Here, when the component is mounted, I set the welcome message state to be the translation for welcome. But what is happening here is that I set the state to be the translation. So here I set T to be welcome. So that means if the user currently sets English as their locale, then we're going to set this English directly here as the state. So basically we're doing set welcome message and we pass the English directly. Now when you do something like this, React does not know that when the locale changes, you have to also change the state. No, you just pass this string and that is what React knows. And if the user is currently on the Dutch locale and they refresh, what we're basically doing again is that we're passing this string as it is to this place here. So if I come back here and I put this part, if we're on the English version and we refresh, you can see the English shows here. But if we click the Dutch, it doesn't change because again, we had coded this string as the state. And now that we're on the Dutch version, if I should refresh, we have the Dutch version hard coded to the string or to the state. But if we click on English, it doesn't change because this is hard coded. So how can we fix this? Well, one way you can fix this is that you can pass the T as a dependency so that when anything in the translation changes, like the locale, then the welcome message would also change. Now by doing this, if I refresh, we have the English version, and when I click on Dutch, you can see that it changes. This use effect runs again because the dependency has changed. But another way you can go about it is that instead of passing the translation directly here, you can pass the key. So now we don't even need to have T as the dependency. We're passing set welcome message and we're passing the key from translations, which is this for Dutch, this is this for English. And now we can go here and then have the T like this. So now we pass that key to the translation function. That way, when we are on English, it's on English. When we change to Dutch, we don't have to run our use effect again. Nope. Since we're just keeping track of the key, then that key will also be reflected here when the translation changes. But let me show you a different example where that becomes even more important. I have this feedback form. Let's go to the English version of the feedback form. Now for this form, we keep track of two states, status and server response. Status can be success or error. I'm not using TypeScript here. If not, I would have already typed it to success or error. But it can be success or error, and then the server response can be what we actually got from the server or what we expect to get from the server. And then here, if everything is successful, we have the status as success, and then we have the server response as feedback success. Translations, when we go to feedback success, you can see thank you, your feedback has been submitted successfully. And we also have feedback error, oops, something went wrong, please try again. So in the feedback, this is what we do when it is successful. When it is not successful, we have error and feedback error. But we're making that same mistake again, where instead of passing the key, we're passing the translation directly. So now when we go here and we submit the form, we have thank you, your feedback has been submitted successfully. And let's say here we intentionally throw an error. Now when we refresh and we press submit, you see now we have this error. But we're currently on the English version right now. Watch what happens when I click on Dutch. I click on Dutch, everything else changes except this string that I'm keeping in a state. This is why at the beginning of the video I talked about translations that you keep in a state. I'm keeping this in a state, and you can see because we passed the translation directly, even though I am now on the Dutch translation, it's still showing this English. Now if I refresh, I click the form, now I have the Dutch one, but if I go back to English, this is not translated to English. How do you improve this again? Well, instead of passing the translation directly, you pass the key. Then here we pass feedback error as the key. Also here we pass feedback error as the key. And then in our component where we are showing this success and error, we can now wrap this in the translation function. So this way, as long as the component is re-rendered because the translation has changed, that key that doesn't change would be passed for the right translation. So now if I come here again and I refresh, I submit the form, we have English, oops, something is wrong. I go to Dutch, we have the Dutch version. And the same thing happens if the form is submitted successfully, and that is when I throw or I remove my fake error. So now when I refresh, we're currently on the Dutch. When we send this feedback, we have the English, and when I change to English, this also changes to English until the info box is removed. So when you're working with translations that you have to keep in a state, a very good tip is store the key of the content in the state instead of the actual translation. And then in your component, you can render the actual translation by passing the key you have in your state to your translation function. I hope this was helpful. Please give it a like and subscribe, and see you in my next video.